I come to you here by courtesy of iPad, but also I come to this whole campaign as a democratic socialist. As a boy, thank you. As a boy, I grew up in Scotland, which was very much regarded as North Britain, a land very much in the shadow of two world wars. In fact, throughout the early part of the 20th century, Scotland's sense of itself was dominated by world conflict, defined by its position as part of an empire at war, a land of service to the common weal of the United Kingdom. Its cultural, social, and national identity was very much put on the back burner. Of course, there was the dissonant voice of Scots nationalism, which appeared to me to be stuck in an archaic, quaint, and charmingly eccentric hinterland of risible discontent. I mean, as a boy, I couldn't wait to leave this land. I had no sense of its history, apart from a bogus romantic nostalgia for the comic book tales of Culloden, Rob Roy, Bonnie Prince Charlie, and Flora MacDonald. I mean, none of it seemed real. I couldn't wait to get away. I went south to London, to the big city, London. The cries of laddie, "Oh, dinna go there, stay where you are. You're safe here," echoing in my ears. I got lost, and happily so, in the big city. And of course, it coincided with one of the great periods in these islands' history, the 1960s, a time of great social mobility, a brief window, when anything seemed possible, but it was brief. And ironically, it was at that time I began to get a sense of myself as a Celt and as a Scot. I didn't have to protest who I was, I just was. And it dawned on me that my protestations were homegrown, and for me, only took place back home, in Scotland. Now, this baffling thought and theme has been with me my entire life. This may appear to be an argument against the yes position, but please bear with me on this thought. The very notion of independence comes from a position of security. As a Scotsman living in Scotland, I never had that sense of security because my position as a Scotsman was not secure. I was, and I didn't realize it till many years later, I was in fact a young man without a nation. My country had been subsumed into a United Kingdom, and I had no say in the matter. Outside of Scotland, I was a Scot, but in reality an emigre Scot, however spurious, but it was a sense of identity. It also gave me an insight into why so many Scots of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century lived their lives on the hoof. Livingston, Lewis Stevenson, Andrew Carnegie, Graham Bell, John Logie Baird. Many of the American signatories of the Declaration of Independence were the sons of Scots immigrants, men without a country whose sons created one. But of course, our forefathers' contribution to the political and philosophical debates of these islands did, at periods, give a sense of security, a glimpse of what was possible, a lasting vision of profound political and philosophical thinking. The period of the Scottish Enlightenment, the magnificent David Hume and Adam Smith in the 18th century, the visionary socialism of Robert Cunningham Graham and James Keir Hardie of the 19th century, which led directly to the revolutionary fervour of the Independent Labour Party in the early part of the 20th century, personified by the infamous Clydeside Five, Maxton, Shinwell, Johnson, Kirkwood, and Wheatley, only to be compromised and betrayed by the self-serving Ramsay MacDonald, the Tony Blair of his generation. These periods, though, however fleeting, showed something profound about these Celts of North British origin. Their grasp of the human condition, man and woman's search for social, economic, cultural, and a just meaning to their lives. In my confused and burgeoning sensibility, I began to see some kind of path to these events. Maybe, perhaps just maybe, these periods were not fleeting, but signposts of an organic nature. I mean, this was borne out when I returned to perform in Edinburgh in the late 80s. I mean, there was no longer the cultural exodus there had been in the late 50s and early 60s. And despite a failed and botched referendum, a fully fledged cultural identity had emerged. And what's more, it had been growing pre the 1979 debacle from the mid-70s. I mean, I was ashamed in my ignorance that I'd been unaware of this change. I mean, it had, to my mind, must have been pretty subversive. But no, it happened openly and in full consciousness. And this, despite the fact of no voice in Westminster. That Parliament, that appalling Thatcher administration, which patronisingly treated North Britain as the loony relation while lives in the attic. Those cultural Celts had placed themselves with dignity above a Tory administration that created 30% unemployment in Ayrshire alone, evoking Charlie and Craig Reed's letter from America, epitaph, Bathgate, no more, Linwood, no more, Methil, no more. I have to say I was very proud and moved by the land of my birth. It was finding its voice and identity through cultural renaissance and resistance. Whereas on the other side of the Irish pond, people were dying daily in the struggle to find their voice and identity. And remember, during that time, on these shores, not a shot was fired. So again, the horrific Thatcher's years was another signpost, an organic marker of a journey. And then we came to the Blair years. Now, I have been a Labour supporter all my life, all my working life, inspired by those I've already mentioned. And I was very proud to have been selected to be the voice of New Labour, whatever that meant, in 1997 general election. I was there on the South Bank at 2 o'clock in the morning when the party, my party, got the biggest mandate, 416 seats, to carry it into the 21st century. And within 3 months, as a result of the Labour manifesto, Scotland received its parliament back after an absence of 390 years. Another signpost. So, now we have a new Labour Prime Minister. What's on the horizon? Well, certainly not as much as I had hoped. I mean, a lot of talk about every boy and girl should have their own computer at school. And then the little problem of Iraq looms on the horizon. So let's invade. For what? To what end? And there we are. A decision has been made. It's official. We're at war. Oh, the waste. The terrible, terrible waste. Opportunity. Life. The soundbite is king. Let's find out what the people want. And let's give them an approximation. Where is the vision? On the back burner. Oh, and as for the Scottish Parliament, well, let's hog-tie the ruling party, which after all is our party. They will perform, whether they like it or not, Westminster's bidding. And there, as they say in the theatre, is the rub. Yet another signpost on this big journey. We are suffering increasingly the failure of central government to come to terms with what is happening throughout these islands. I'm not just concerned about here, but also what is happening in the south. I'm an Anglophile. I love England. It has afforded me some many golden opportunities. But more and more, as time goes on, repeatedly, Parliament at Westminster can see no further than the end of its own bridge. I think Scotland has earned the right to its own nation status. It has come through it by means of a painstaking evolution. It has earned the right to control its own destiny And it will certainly make a better job of it than that Parliament that has not the foggiest clue about Scotland's cultural, economic and social needs. In Europe at this moment, we are witnessing countries being fiscally cascated for being who they are. The influence of the greed of market speculator merely shows the failure of the centralized Brussels Parliament to come to terms with the social, economic and cultural need of its own members. And that is why I have come to the belief that an independent Scotland is a Scotland that will be free of undue influence, to bend its cultural will to a state of centralist servitude. An independent Scotland will be outwardly looking, culturally confident, fiscally successful. An example to other small nations how to hold their heads up high without taint. And now, after all the signposts, more than any time in our history, we have arrived at the moment to realize our potential. Please, let's not waste it. Please, let's say yes.